That was a great talk that Jeanette just gave, right? That was pretty fun. Tony and I were in the back, grinning ear to ear, beaming the whole time, nerding out. There's a couple things that she spoke about that I think have played a pretty big influence on both of us. I think some of those concepts like paint the city you want to see, follow the people, for sure, was one of those. She's had a huge influence on a bunch of cities and certainly on both of us. And, I think it's interesting how much has changed since 2007 when she became commissioner. That's actually the year that both IOB and Street Plans were founded, too. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, how much influence she's had on you and Mike.
Well, she did. She had a huge influence on us. And I wonder, where can we get these shirts? I mean, are these going to be on the website, or what's the deal with that? It's hard for us to talk about this now. I think she took a lot of the subjects that we were going to talk about, and she really explained them. So we're going to do a little bit of commentary here. As far as at least my inspiration and my connection to this story is really personal, because I, went on a trip. It was a trip that I took with my son, my 4-year-old, to New York City, a father-son trip, and we were just goofing off, walking around the city, and I had to make a deal with him that we were going to do something that was not architecture or urbanism related, because that's really what we were there for. So we went to a toy store, and the toy store was in Times Square, Toys R Us in Times Square. And I didn't really notice it at the time. This was Memorial Day weekend, 2009. It was the weekend that they did the demonstration of Times Square. And I didn't know what was going on, and we went into the toy store, and I didn't pay attention to what was happening. I have a 4-year-old, and was kind of hassled and not paying attention. But when we left the toy store, armed with this new toy that we had to put together, it was a transformer, there were these blue plastic lawn chairs everywhere. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. It was something that resonated with me. It was real. It was there. I knew that it was inexpensive and short-term, temporary, and it allowed me to enjoy that space in a way that I hadn't. And I think Jeanette said it best. I mean, when I lived there in New York, I wouldn't be caught dead in Times Square. I disliked it tremendously. I hated it. There was no place to actually sit and enjoy that space. And that day was the first day that I actually was able to enjoy the space. And at the time, I had been working for the first part of my career as an architect at the offices of Chow Cooper and Associates with Madi Chao. And we were doing really important work, I thought, and really great work. Beautiful, something that could live up to the standard of this building, let's say. And we did a lot of great designs, and all that work, when the economy tanked, it just went away. And that really struck me. It created a disillusion in me that was very strong at that time, that weekend specifically. At the same time, in my private life, in my community volunteer life, I had been working as a transit advocate for the first part of my career. We passed a 50-cent sales tax that was going to fund transit in Miami-Dade County. But after the first few years of that transit tax, there was little political will to actually finish this transit expansion that was 80 plus miles of new rail line. So all of these things happened all around the same time within a 2 or 3 month period. Our work all evaporated, the grand transit plan evaporated, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? Why are we in this business? The reason I got into this world in the first place was after reading The Death and Life of Great American Cities, because I thought I can make change happen. I thought it was going to happen a lot faster than it actually happened. So this is that first day, right? This is that first Memorial Day weekend. And when we started to think about the history of this project and think about where it came from, we found that there was a plan from the 1960s to close Broadway. This plan to close Broadway to pedestrians from the 1960s would be considered progressive by today's standards. I mean, in any of our cities, if we tried to close an entire corridor as important as Broadway just for pedestrians, we'd be laughed out of the room. And here, Jeanette and Mayor Bloomberg come along and close Times Square to traffic. That to me was monumental, the fact that it was based in a plan. But more than that, when we started to study the evolution of that project, a methodology emerged that we could start to apply to different projects in different cities around the country, right? So it wasn't just do this initial disruption, but there was a fair bit of improvements, that iterative quality that I think as new urbanists we really rely on in our charrette process. The iterative quality shows up here physically. So there are small improvements over time, and then you're always doing that data collection the way that Janet said. But all the while, there's still a long-term plan and a long-term vision. And this is something that I think is key, that there is still planning with tactical urbanism, and there still should be planning. And here's that semi-final or final product. The important thing, I think, to note about this is that this would never have happened if they had not done that initial disruption. We would still be talking about this drawing, about the idea of closing Times Square rather than what are the types of street furniture that are being used, right? So to me, what was really powerful and still resonates today is that initial disruption. That's what really resonates with people when it comes to the idea of tactical urbanism.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about like why you think that it's so meaningful for people besides you to use tactical urbanism as a tool, right? Like what is it about people's experience working in public spaces that makes tactical urbanism so appealing?
Well, I mean, I think it goes beyond public space, right? You think about the political conversation that we're having today, the cynicism that people have with their relationship and their attitudes about government. The whole idea, the characters of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, they're both coming from the same place, that feeling of disconnection, of distrust in government. People crave a way of getting involved and being engaged in the city, and being engaged in the democratic processes of our democracy in a way that go beyond elections and normal meetings. And you think about our planning process, the process that happens, let's say, 90% of the time outside of this room, and really half of the time when it comes to new urbanism. You know, it's a public meeting where you go and you sit in an audience like this and you watch a presentation by a consultant, and most of the time you're not really meant to influence that outcome. We're just checking a box, right? We're all kind of experts in this drama. We're giving a show to the public. There's an illusion that there is a public process. And that bothers me, and it should bother everyone here. There shouldn't be an illusion. Well, you have to ask yourself, why are we doing this in the first place? Is it just for the sake of checking a box, or is it for some actual, is it to prevent something bad from happening? So, and I think one of the things to think about is the new urbanism is, or has been, that huge innovation on the public process, right? The whole idea that you would put people together in a room for a week or 2 weeks and really get at an outcome, that was a huge innovation, and I think an improvement upon the existing system, but it stops there. And where tactical urbanism picks up on that thread is that the whole idea of new urbanists, think about how we are on Charette. We sketch a ton of ideas, what Victor Dover calls propose and dispose. Maybe 1 out of 100 ideas will be the good idea, right? But we have to test them out on paper first. So tactical urbanism is just an extension of that process in the real world, right? It's a real-time rendering of what can actually exist. That iterative quality, you think about our technology and our expectations with regard to technology, it makes a lot of sense. You know, all of our devices go through product design right now. You know, all of our phones, our cars, they're prototyped. Everything goes through different versions, and every year we expect a new version to come out, and maybe they'll take away functionality or they'll add some, and we're willing to deal with it because there's going to be a new version coming soon. But I think that attitude now has spilled over into urbanism, and why wouldn't we expect that our cities and our buildings would also have a similar flexibility and a similar ability to adapt and change over time? I think one of the most exciting things for me is that despite the fact that our conventional planning process is a little bit static and it's still not fully figured out, technology allows us access to people and to elected officials in a way that we've never been able to do. You know, the beginning of my career as an advocate, as a supremely powerful bike advocate, I've been able to email elected officials, text, Facebook message, all of these previously unconventional ways of reaching out. Now you have a way. And I think that's one of the exciting things about IOB as well, is that it creates a platform for the acceleration of change that was already happening. And what do you think? I mean, what's your role, and what do you think IOB's role is in that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of people here, I think, have heard about IOB, and I think it's pretty common for most people to think about it sort of like a crowdfunding platform for neighborhoods. But IOB really does a lot more, right? We're working with people who have great ideas for their neighborhoods from the point of that half-baked idea when they still have like a glimmer in their eye thinking about it, all the way through the project development and fundraising and engagement and implementation cycle. And as a tech platform, I think we have a real opportunity to accelerate and amplify change. Local change has been happening for generations and generations, right? Like, people think of great ideas in their communities, bring the resources together, and implement change. But they take a really long time, and it's really hard. And all the change that's happening there that's so important often stays right there in the community, and other people don't have the opportunity to learn about it. So IOB as a tech platform can help accelerate the direction of resources to people with great ideas so that they can plan, fund, and make those projects happen faster, and iterate them with ideas from other people, and then amplify those successful projects outside the neighborhood so other people can learn about them. When you're talking about people being frustrated with the community engagement process, I think people are frustrated with that, but people are also just frustrated with the way that cities don't work for them. The next slide here is this project that IOB supported that I love. So the guy in the middle there, his name is Ben Dom. He immigrated to Atlanta in 2003 to get his PhD in electrical engineering. And before that, he lived in Paris. And he's a transit user in Atlanta. And he rides the bus all the time. And one of the things he really loved about the Paris bus system is when you went to the bus stop, there would be a sign that told you what time the bus was coming. But those of you who've been to Atlanta, you know that it just says bus stop with nothing else, right? This is not good. So at the time that Ben was sort of like frustrated with all of this, IOB launched this match campaign with Transit Center to incentivize any rider-led idea to change transit and change the transit experience. So Ben was coming home one night late after a concert downtown, and there was a service interruption on the bus line. So MARTA, the transit authority, put up the sign that said service interruption. They stuck them in plastic bags and they zip-tied them to the bus stop. And most people would be super frustrated at this point, right? Like, this is terrible. And Ben saw opportunity here in that plastic cover zip-tied to the pole. So he went on IOB and he applied to be a part of the match fund. He raised $534 to print out bus schedules for 52 bus stops. He raised all the money. He had never done any fundraising ever before. His neighbors chipped in to fund the project. And he was able to go ahead and install time schedules at 52 bus stops around the city, put them in the plastic bags, and zip tie them to the bus stop. So IOB supported quite a few unsanctioned projects, so we were kind of expecting to get a phone call from like the Atlanta PD or MARTA the next day telling us that he was going to get a slap on the wrist and they were going to take down all the signs. Instead, MARTA actually reached out directly to Ben and thanked him for his work, and they encouraged him to launch a program called the MARTA Army, which is what these really happy, enthusiastic people are. And it was basically an all-volunteer network of people inspired by Ben's work who decided that they were going to hang up bus schedules at their bus stops across Atlanta. This is crazy. These are people who take their volunteer time to put a piece of paper at their bus stop and then take selfies hanging up this timetable, right? And MARTA's excited about it. So they've changed the way that they think about citizen involvement, right? So IOB thinks about its impacts in these three layers, right? One, what is the physical transformation on the space? Now there's 300 bus stops that have time schedules at them. Two, what happened to the leader? What's the transformation of the leader? Now Ben, he's basically the most important transit activist in Atlanta. And then three, what's the change for the city agency? How do they now think about the role of citizen engagement? For MARTA, they've changed a lot, and it's a really inspiring story, I think, that could, have applications in a lot of other places. So I think it's an interesting direction for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've been working on a project in Miami where we're trying to, in an analogous way, work with a private entity, a corporation. And this is a project called the Loveland Trail. It's a 100-foot wide, 6-mile long rail corridor. And in this case, we're not working with a municipal government. I mean, we are in a way, but the owner of the land is a private entity called Florida East Coast Industries. This is Henry Flagler's railroad. The whole reason most of the eastern seaboard of Florida exists is because of this railroad. So it's very historic and centrally located in Dade County. And it's been a learning curve for us dealing with a developer, because they're acting as the developer in this case, and teaching them how they should interact with the community, how they can enable us to help them. And so the story for the Loveland Trail begins when I moved in very close by to the trail, because I knew I had already been advocating, as I mentioned, for transit in my community, and I knew that this was out there. So I knew that this was a project that was going to happen sooner or later, and I was making an investment in my land to buy trail adjacent. So a core group of us just started a group called Friends of Loveland Trail, and including Victor Dover and Madi Chael and a few others down in Miami. And we just started organizing and drumming up support for this project and making people aware of it, because it's kind of hidden, which is one of the really great qualities of it. You see it's nestled in pockets of suburbia, but it also connects to 5 schools and 4 major parks and our actual regional transit. So we met with and it had been planned for ages as a commuter rail, light rail, and a greenway. There are plans after plans made for this corridor. Funny enough, no agency, no municipal government ever actually interacted with the railroad, with the owner. So these were all plans made somewhere that never even considered what the owner wanted. When we came on the scene, we knew that was not the way. So we went and talked to the property owner initially, and they were lukewarm about the idea of a trail. Their main interest was really just monetizing the corridor. They wanted to sell it. They didn't really care who they were selling it to. And basically, we just had that conversation with them. We tried to get things started for a long time. And after a year of organizing and gathering people, one day, it really all happened over a week, we all got in the mail postcards for a comprehensive development master plan change for this land, from transportation to single-family homes and multifamily that were going to fit on the 100 feet. And they had included, once we talked to them, a token 5-foot sidewalk as part of the trail component. Of course, that did not go over well with us at all. And we told them, we know as new urbanists that there is a better way. We know we can get you your unit count if you have a public meeting, a charrette process, have a master plan. The CDMP process is not the venue to create a master plan for this land, because once it's approved, it's basically, that's the plan, right? So we wanted the ability for the community to come and interject and say what they wanted, and we were really looking for the win-win, the balance of their private interest with the public interest. And we knew that they were not going to do any sort of public meetings. They told us that outright. So in November of 2014, we held our own pop-up town hall. Now, admittedly, this is a little bit different than citizens somewhere just doing a pop-up town hall, because this is our business. Obviously, we know what to do. But we were able to create a platform for our community group, which was made up of people beyond our profession, to have a voice. And with very little, planning, there was a little bit of planning, but very little planning, we had 500 people come to this meeting. And we invited the railroad to come and explain their plan, explain how they came up with that plan. And for 3 hours, they answered questions, and it was brutal. I felt bad for them at the end of that night, because they were rocked by that audience. And what it did was galvanize the community against that plan. A few weeks later, we had our full commission meeting, and those same 300 people came out to speak, and it was, it changed the whole conversation about what we were able to do on that land. So they withdrew their application. We had a public charrette that was the most well-attended in county history, and the result of that plan was that 3/4 of the land would be preserved as pine rockland, and a quarter, roughly, would be trail-oriented development, where the trail would go through the buildings. This was a win in our book by any standard. But following that meeting, what happened was the railroad executives called me and said, "Tony, we have a problem. You have 300 of your friends who just went up on the dais on the record and said that they walk on the trail and they jog on the trail and they ride bikes on the trail, and they're trespassing on our land. So we need to put up fences and barbed wire at every single cross street so that people can't get on our land. And I said, guys, think about what you're saying. You just went through a whole year of brutal community involvement. You're going to double down on that strategy? That's terrible. What you need to do is open up the trail, create a temporary trail, and allow people to access it and use it and see it. And what they did was, within a month, I negotiated with them for almost a year. And it was only after the CEO of the railroad went out and took a bike ride that he actually realized the value of the idea. And within 1 month of that bike ride, they invested $200,000 in removing the existing rail berm and putting a temporary trail, albeit this is not the permanent trail, but it's still a big improvement. And since then, we've had monthly meetings, monthly events, public events, bike rides, and different types of public events where we get people out on the trail, and it's been a hugely successful undertaking. And I think one of the main takeaways, or the things that I observe, is that we would not have been so successful, I think, if we hadn't, if our demographic in Miami hadn't changed over the last 10 years. And most people don't know this, but Miami-Dade County, you have 45% of the people living on 15% of the land. That's a huge concentration of people in a very small area. And most people in Miami, there's still this divide between old Miami and new Miami. Half the people still think about Miami as a rural, suburban place, and the other half see it as an urban, compact, walkable place. I know that's a conversation that you're having here in Detroit, and you're really having it all around the country. And in IOB's work here, how do you all deal with that juxtaposition of people's perception of where they live?
Yeah, it's really complicated. So for those of you who don't know, IOB opened up an office here in Detroit and in Cleveland in March of this year. I think in Detroit, there's a real important conversation happening about the two Detroits, right? There's a lot of new people who are bringing a lot of new energy here. And I think it's a real question about who's entitled and who feels empowered to lead, right? It's like Jane Jacobs always said, cities can serve everybody, but only when they're created by everybody, right? And one of the reasons we wanted to work here in Detroit is that, IOB actually is really, really invested in working in neighborhoods where there's been long histories of disinvestment. And we are an unusual sort of tech platform where we are specifically designed to work with low-income residents. It's hard, it takes a long time to build trust and to do project development work, but it's really important, and I think it means a lot to people to be able to know that they have the opportunity and the ability to make incremental change in their own communities with what they already have, and not wait for change and funding to materialize from the outside. A lot of communities here in Detroit have been waiting a really long time for change. So we're just starting our work here in Detroit. A lot of our experience is based on the last 3 years that we've been working in Memphis, Tennessee, where we've also been invested in a couple specific, really low-income neighborhoods. And it's important, and there's some lessons that we want to take away from that. And so one of them is that we see leadership as something that can be incremental and can start with something really small, and it can build really fast. And in Memphis, when we started working there, there was a few people who were really leading a lot of the change in Memphis. We had a couple partners who told us, we rely too heavily on the same 10 people, right? This proverbial 10 people is leading everything. And they're carrying the brunt of all the change in the city. We need more leaders. And so IOB's on-the-ground strategists work to identify people, either emerging or longtime leaders, who are expressing some kind of investment, in their neighborhood. And one of the neighborhoods we've been working in is now sort of in a new development. It's the medical district. And there was a project there led by a principal of an elementary school called Carnes Elementary. And on that block, there's a lot of vacant lots. The kids walk to school and they walk by a lot of vacant lots. And so the principal worked with a couple other people in the community to transform one lot into a garden so the kids would have the opportunity not just to learn about math and science through gardening or whatever, what everybody always talks about, but also just like know that they could themselves like plant seeds of change and be responsible for the outcomes of their own neighborhood, right? And so the Carnes Garden started getting going. This is one picture from the garden, and it was really beautiful. There's like nice vegetables, and the kids have a chance to play out there. It's great. We started noticing like little projects building up around it, and one of them came up, and it was super interesting. People who had been involved in the garden for a while applied on IOB to start a project called "We Want to Buy James a Lawnmower." And we're like, this is sort of unusual. Who is James? So that's James. He's on the right-hand side. He's wearing a black T-shirt, and he has a shovel in his hand. James Alsobrook lives on that block, and he had basically become the neighborhood's de facto groundskeeper. And once a week, he would go out and mow all the lawns that were vacant, right? And it was really important. And then one day, he just like lost access to the lawnmower he used to have. So the neighbors got together and they launched "We Want to Buy James a Lawnmower." They raised $559. They bought a lawnmower, a gas can, and a lock. And now James can mow the lawns again, right? And so this is like a small, but I think really important story, right? Because this is one of these neighborhoods that people pay attention to and think they're like under-resourced, right? There's high rates of vacancy, high rates of unemployment, low-income residents. And you could have demographers and statisticians and planners and developers do all kinds of studies and site visits on this neighborhood, and no one would ever say, you know what, we should really make sure that James Alsobrook has a lawnmower that he can use, right? And so like residents have ingenuity and specific information about their neighborhoods that's really critical. That's why I love Jeanette's note, like follow the people, right? There's a lot of instinct there. So I think that this is like an important part of citizenship, right? People can take these small steps to participate on their block and become better citizens step by step. There's almost 1,500 days between every presidential election, and I think especially right now, we know that we need people to participate as citizens more than ever, right? There's like 9% of urban residents consider themselves like civically leading. We can do a lot better than that, and I think IOB is interested in working here in Detroit and in Cleveland and in all the other cities because we want to give people an opportunity to step up and lead.
Yeah, and I think people are hungry for that sort of interaction, for the feeling that they are connected to our democracy in a way that goes beyond elections. President Obama recently in a speech in Flint said something to the effect of, we are the government. The government is us. So when we talk about the government as this amorphous, distant thing, we have to be aware that it's not. It's something that we can empower ourselves to take on responsibilities of a lot of the things that we think government should be doing. We can do that. We can initiate that change and hope that the government follows suit. They think about, I was watching Doug's presentation earlier about the bell curve, right? And where we are as new urbanists in the fight against suburbia and this whole battle that we're in. You think about where suburbia was 30 years after the suburban revolution. If you just mark it as the end of World War II. 30 years after the end of World War II was the 1980s. The world was completely suburban by that time. You were completely taken over. Here we are 30 years into new urbanism, and sometimes it feels to me that we're still just scratching the surface, that we dominate the academic conversation and the professional conversation within these halls. But when it comes to the actual built result, we're still not there. I think that we still have a lot of work to do to accelerate, and if it's another 30 years, assuming that we're at the top of that bell curve, we need to do a lot more faster. I don't want to wait till I'm 35 right now, until I'm in my mid-60s to see actual change. So my challenge to everybody here, till we see each other again next year in Seattle, is go make change happen. Don't wait for a client, don't wait for government, go make change happen now in your communities, okay? Thank you all, thanks for having us.